Welcome.
Yeah, welcome to this second session of our 2022 Intentional Communities, Sociocracy and Intentional Communities Conference. I have a few things that I want to remind you about in terms of how we're interacting with each other here in this Zoom space. If you would be willing, please make sure to stay muted during the presentation. There will be a time for questions at the end, and we'll gather some questions, and then we can both add them in the chat and also unmute and ask our questions. We'll work on facilitating that towards the end of the session. It can be distracting if we have side conversations in the chat, so we ask that you refrain from doing that, although you can certainly ask questions in the chat, and those will be gathered, and we'll work through those. And then if you need any technical support, I am here and available to answer those questions. You could direct message me in the chat. And today we have Ted Rau offering a workshop on, I don't like that proposal, what do I do? Objections and disagreements from inside and outside the circle. I offer it over to you, Ted.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. In case you know me and you're wondering, I've already gotten a comment on this red curtain behind me. It looks like I'm like on a theater stage or something. And I'm in a hotel. I'm traveling in Europe right now. And today we're talking about people who disagree. Actually, the reason I chose this topic is because it is one of the big fears that people have when they consider sociocracy. It's like, wait, what if somebody decides something that I don't like, especially if a group transitions from whole group consensus to sociocracy or dynamic governance. So but let me start at the beginning. There we are. I live in the same community as Jerry. I live in the same house as Jerry, who you might have met in the welcome session. We are now called Cherry Hill Co-housing, and it was previously Pioneer Valley Co-housing, built since 1994. Many of the original people still live in the community, and it's been Sociocratic around since 2011, and I arrived around that time myself, so that's how I learned about it. And just so you know who I am, so I'm a Sociocracy trainer. I'm one of the co-founders of Sociocracy for All. Had my part in writing Many Voices, One Song, wrote Who Decides, Who Decides. I have 5 children, member of community life in the circle community life in my community. So, and I have been since 2011, I think. I think it was the circle that I started out with right when we adopted. And so and I have been in that circle, I think, without interruption. And all the stories, often all the community stories typically come from there. We get exposed to a lot of stories there, as one does. So I don't like that proposal or that idea or that decision or whatever. What do I do? There are 2 parts here, and that's what I had in the subtitle. Whatever I called it, objections and disagreements from inside and outside of the circle, I think it was. So I want to be very clear about those different scenarios because they're very different and I will treat them separately. The first one is, if you're a circle member, if your circle is trying to make a decision where you would go like, what, that? No, we shouldn't do that. So you're one of the people here. That's you or me. And then the other scenario is a circle is making the decision or has a plan or whatever, or has made a decision that you as the outside member of that circle don't agree with. And in a Sociocratic context, those are very different situations. And actually, for those of you who are into kind of word and hair splitting, that's also why I called it objections and disagreements, because technically this is an objection. This is technically not even an objection because only circle members can consent, but we'll get there, or object actually. So we will start with the first scenario. So I'm first going to talk about this scenario, and then there will be a little bit of a change in topic, and we will talk about the second scenario. So now from inside of the circle, what can circle members do? If there's some plan floating, somebody wrote a proposal, somebody had an idea that we disagree with. So let's just first cover real quick or review what is an objection. Objection means that you have a reason. There are many ways of phrasing it. This is just yet another way. The reason concerned that a proposal conflicts with reaching the circle's aim. So your circle ideally has an aim. That's what defines a circle. What does it do? It's a description of what the circle does. I'll have some examples later. And as I said, only circle members can object. So that's the whole point of sociocracy, that we distribute decision-making and not everybody has a say on everything, because that leads to large groups talking for a long time, which doesn't really lend itself to a deeper and more considerate conversation. So that's why we distribute decision-making. That has more to do with structure than I can go into right this moment. The intention of that is to have a situation where it's deliberate that people from the outside can't stop a circle from doing something. That is a feature, not a bug. The reason that is so is because there's just so much pain in groups where people can just walk into another group and say, stop what you're doing because I disagree. That leads us to so many situations where people get frustrated, the wind is taken out of their sails, a lot of research and deliberation goes into a topic, somebody walks in and says, no, actually, I'm against it, I veto it. And it's that dynamic, actually, that very dynamic that wears so many groups out and has them look at sociocracy. So I want to be very clear about that. We're aware that that is one of the big points in considering sociocracy is, are you willing to trust a smaller group to make a decision and live with that? I want to even call it uncertainty, whether like what they're going to do with that power. But I'll basically what I want to talk about in this presentation is exactly that dance between wait, but how can I be heard from the inside and at the outside? So because it all needs to come together and we need to look at all the aspects of it to really understand how it works. So here's a little example. Let's say the aim of some common house, like a common house circle, is maintaining the common house circle, making it usable for the community, just as an example. Now, somebody could have the proposal that would be to lock the common house at 9:30 p.m. to prevent thefts so that the kitchen aid doesn't walk away in the night, and or the whatever it might be. And now one could have an objection here. For example, wait, but if I want to go work out in the exercise room in the common house at 10 p.m. and I don't bring my key, or if my guest uses the common house, they're going to be locked out. 9:30 seems a little early, which means this proposal is at odds with making it usable, right? Because this proposal might prevent members or non-members from using the common house. So that is an example for an objection, and that's what I mean when I say a reason concerned that a proposal conflicts with reaching the circle's aim. We'll have a few more examples, so if it doesn't quite click now, maybe it'll click later. So now my pep talk about objecting. If somebody has an objection, please object. I can't even emphasize this more. Please object, because an objection in the system is not a bad thing. An objection in the system is that you say if there's a problem. And why would we do something if somebody's sitting in our circle and knows there's going to be a problem, but they don't say it? Once you're in this logic of not wanting like to work towards your aim as well as like as good as you can as a circle, and somebody's sitting on an objection, there is no way you can see an objection in any negative way. It will always be a sense of, oh, thank you, and gratitude if somebody does bring up an objection. And we object, right, as I said, because something doesn't work with our aim. The aim is what we're trying to do. So we're looking at preventable mistakes if somebody objects. So an objection can be nothing but good. Of course, it creates a little bit of extra work, but making a mistake is probably going to create much more work than looking at an objection really quick. So it always pays off. And again, I'll have examples for that. And in particular now, so integrating objections made easy, because the cool thing about sociocracy is not only does it tell us to object, it also tells us what to do next. And there are three headlines or three main categories of ways one can integrate an objection, and they're all brilliant. To me, that's the place where there was the most, or like one of the places where there was the most learning for me in sociocracy. Those were new skills that I didn't have without it. So the obvious first thing is if somebody has an objection and we want to integrate the objection and make the proposal work, the obvious thing to do is, okay, fix the proposal, right? Change it. Duct tape or whatever you need to fix it. But there are other solutions. You can also leave the proposal as is and just shorten the term and say, hey, instead of having this policy, this locking the door policy, the common house, instead of having this policy for 5 years, let's just do it for 6 months and see how it goes. That way, in 6 months, we know more. And then we now don't have to argue whether this is the perfect plan or the horrible plan. In 6 months, we'll know. We just have to dare doing something. And then the other one, the third one often goes together with that, and that is try it out and keep your eyes open. So if somebody is worried about visitors in the guest room in the common house being locked out, keep our eyes open for that. Maybe there's a phone number that you can call, and the person who answers that phone then knows how often that happens. I'll have 2 examples, I think. Maybe 1, I don't remember. Let's see. So let's say our proposal is guest rooms can be booked by visitors. Right? Like people who want to look at the community. I know that's often a hot item in communities. That's why I picked it. Can people who are traveling through or looking at the community book the guest rooms? So the proposal is that they can, keeping it simple, but now somebody objects and says, whoa, but what if some random visitor, like, you know, a co-housing tourist is blocking the guest room and then my aunt doesn't have a place to stay? So the aim is making the common house usable for the community. If we give the guest room to random strangers, the community, as in me, can't use it the way it was intended. So that's a clear case of an objection. Now what we can do is modify the proposal. I have all kinds of ideas, and I'm happy to hear yours as well. Like we could, this is just a quick brainstorm. I took like 3 minutes on this. So, you know, this is just, I'm not proposing any of this. I'm just wanting to give you examples. So we could say, okay, whenever my aunt comes visit, the random stranger gets kicked out and says, oh, sorry, we can't have the guest room anymore. We could say, okay, visitors can only book up to 4 weeks in advance, because if my aunt is coming, I will no longer in advance and I can book for the holidays and Thanksgiving and whatever. Or we could have more bookable space so that we have kind of an overflow place if somebody has an extra room in the community or whatever, so that we take the edge off. Those would be modifications because we're changing the proposal, we're adding extra pieces and so on. Then we could also just say, okay, this might or might not be true. We do not know. Let's just try it out. And I could ask the person who's objecting, okay, I hear you. That seems risky to you because you care about your relatives, and giving them a space makes a lot of sense to me. Since we don't know how much overlap there will be and how many random strangers even come visit, can we just try it out for 6 months and have the same conversation again, like review the decision in 6 months? Or in 2 or in 3 or in 4, or whatever the person that's objecting is willing to give me. try it out and measure. We could say, okay, somebody is like the person who's managing the bookings also kind of makes a tally mark for every booking conflict. And we tell them, okay, if this happens twice, close to each other, tell us immediately and we'll talk. And we'll change the rule. But until then, this stays in place, stays in effect. So these two in particular are ways to get us new information, because often we hypothesize about things that might or might not happen when honestly, we don't actually know. And these are ways to go get a show on the road so that we can try something out and at some point in the future, very soon, have some real life data that then, like information that then we can talk about. Another example here, just for the variety, same aim. And now I say different proposal. So let's say somebody wants to have their wedding here. Outside groups can book the room for a fee of $500 a day, like they can book the common house. And now somebody says, whoa, that's unaffordable for volunteer groups. That's not usable for my knitting group or whatever. And now we could modify it. And I'm sure you can find all kinds of ideas, like we could make it cheaper, we could have a sliding scale, we could try it out and see how many groups say $500, are you insane? And track that and measure and see what happens, how many people are going to be upset. And that takes some courage as a circle to make decisions and say, okay, let's see how people receive it. And there's going to be some more on that. So if you still have some doubts about like, wait, circles are still going to make risky decisions, hear me out. There's going to be more on that. Little pep talk again. I cannot tell you how many times there have been tensions in my community because people who were sitting on an objection did not object. It is not worth it. It's not worth it. Because I can't tell you how many times it happened that people knew this wouldn't work, but they didn't dare to say it because they didn't want to be the party pooper, because they weren't so sure, because it was uncomfortable, whatever. Somebody knew and the circle screwed it up. And even more likely is this scenario that you'll regret it. And for example, one I found horrible story that happened in my community in a sub-circle of ours, I found it really excruciating to witness it, was that there was some discussion around a house sale. Two people were sitting on an objection and didn't say it. The meeting ended, decision was made, the email was sent. And the next morning, the two of them woke up thinking, I shouldn't have said yes to this. But the email was sent. Now what do? Now it just gets messier. It just gets worse from here on. Had they spoken up in the meeting, everything would have changed. And these things have long-lasting effects, right? These, like, people still carry the fact that back then they didn't speak up and the downstream effects from there. And in my experience, and I'm a little burned on that just again and again, people not being honest with themselves and people not being honest with other people is a mess that leads to more pain very, very often. So if you have an objection, please object. And then I'd rather invest in facilitators and in people in skills generally so that people don't get shaken by objections, but that we get to hear them. Because then we can respond and together find a good solution. All right, change of topic. Take a deep breath. What can non-circle members do? So now let's say I'm in community life, I'm not in Common House Circle. So Common House Circle makes a decision, I go, they decided, what? Now what do I do? That happens, right? So first I want to say, and this is a little bit of a play on where I know people's attention often goes. They say, what can we do into our agreement? What can be put into our agreement so I can stop the circle from doing it right away? Like there should be an appeal process. I should be able to veto something. I should be, I don't know. That's where people's energy goes. I'm like, yeah, I understand that. I get it. And if you pull that out of your pocket, it's going to be divisive and disruptive for sure. Because the circle came to whatever decision they came for a reason. So if you helicopter in and say, stop, I'm going to stop this harm from happening, that's going to take some emotional cleanup. So yes, have an appeal process and strive to never in your life use it. It's very similar to bringing an umbrella. I know that's superstition, but it doesn't really carry over, but you know what I mean. Bring an umbrella so that it doesn't rain. Have an appeal process so that you can be relaxed about it. And I could appeal, but how about I try talking to each other first? So you can relax and you can know that there's ultimately something, that biggest thing that you can pull off the shelf and say, stop, but don't use it. Like really don't use it. We have an appeal process that has not been used, and I'm really happy about it. Whenever it was on the horizon that somebody said, I might appeal this decision, I was like, ooh, that's going to be messy. I don't want that. We're a community. So that's why now I have a list of what can you do instead of pulling that. And I want to say that I always, and you will hear that again from me at the end, I always use this phrase or this frame of both the circle and the people from outside of the circle have to move towards each other, because we're interdependent. We are in a community. We can't just point at the other person and say, you are bad human beings for making this decision. That's probably too simple of a story. So now on the left side, there's what the circle can do. On the right side will be what the people from outside the circle can do. So circles can, in order to prevent this from happening in the first place, that somebody is shocked at a decision that was made or that will be likely made or whatever, when they already float before they start talking about a big topic, that they're now going to start talking about it. Just so you know, heads up, like our membership circle and my community did that. They sent an email when they touched a really, really emotional item. It's about whether, like in my community, you have to be there's a certain process so that you can buy a house, right? Like some membership process. But now what if I want to put my children, like I'm not an owner in the community. So if an owner wants to put their child as into their will, can they inherit the house if they're not a member and they have to go through the process like everybody else? That seemed odd to people. Like, my kid grew up here. Why should they, Anyway, emotional topic. But my whole point here is that Membership Circle did a brilliant thing in just sending an email to the community saying, just so you know, in the next few months, Membership Circle will have a look at the following topic, and they said a few sentences about it, just so you know. That's already preventing a lot of heartache, because everybody who has a strong opinion about it might now seek the conversation with them, over a meal, on the path, whatever. That's the kind of glue that makes it work. Then, of course, ask for input along the way. At some point, for example, the very circle did, like in our all-member meeting that we use for feedback, they asked for feedback on, as far as I remember, and they might even have a separate event and say, hey, next Wednesday after meal, a few people from Membership Circle are going to stay longer and tell them what you think, or send us email, fill out the survey, whatever it might be. There's all kinds of different ways of what one can do. And by the way, often forgotten, and I forgot it just now too, if you know that somebody has a very strong opinion about something, like you make a pet policy and you have somebody who has been bitten by dogs 3 times, nothing prevents you from giving them a call and saying like, hey, I'm really curious what you think, because we're going to touch the dog policy. I'm curious what comes up for you. Because sometimes people hide behind policy work and circles because they don't want to seek out the direct conversation. So needs to be listed too. We're not just a community, we're also people, and we all know each other, right? And we know what the typical issues are. So having the courage to actually walk up to somebody is useful. Another way is good circle minutes, right? If like it's happened to me that a circle made a decision, I thought, whoa, that's odd. That's not at all what I expected. But before I do anything, at first I just go into their notes and read about it, so that I get a better idea of the context of where this decision came from. This is a tricky one here. Good follow through and accountability to respond. So let's say somebody contacts Community Life and has some issue, and then it takes us, let's say, 3 meetings to chew on this issue, and it takes us 2 extra meetings to even get around to it. Now we're looking at something like 4 or 5 months until we can get back to them. That means in 4 or 5 months, when we finally finished talking on the topic and made a decision and whatever we came up on, we probably want to send an email halfway and say, hey, just so you know, we heard your feedback, we're working on it, read about it here. And at the end, we want to say, so here's finally our official response. Here's what we're doing or not doing. Even if you choose to drop the topic, responding back to the person is one of those little pieces that makes people feel like they live in a community where their voice matters or not. So it really is a big deal, that piece. And it's really easy to forget. We've forgotten those things and it wasn't good. So it's something I really, that note to myself was kind of like really get back to people, work hard to make that happen. And then I'll talk about another thing just a little bit more deeply, really quick, checking time on the next slide. So that'll unpack that a little bit more. Now, what can the individual from outside of the circle do so that there is good communication and good kind of alignment between circles and what they decide and me from the outside? Well, I can talk to the circle if I disagree. I can read the info on the topic, like, did I really read their emails on the topic? Have I looked at their notes? Do I know enough, basically, to even have a judgment about this? Because I don't think the people in my community are stupid. So if they make a decision that I find alarming, maybe I don't know enough. At least being open to that possibility would make things a lot more smooth in a community. Talk to the leader. If you can't make sense of what they're writing, you still don't get why on earth they would make this decision, talk to the leader, have an actual person or somebody who you trust. It doesn't really matter. Send an email, say like, whoa, even after talking to so-and-so and reading all this stuff, I still can't wrap my head around how you could decide this. You could even show up to a circle meeting. In my community, we have a special rule that you can visit any circle meeting, but you can only kind of hijack, in the judgmental term, you can only hijack the first 15 minutes of the meeting, because you can't expect that your issue now can take up all of their time. And so on. Plenty of things we can do. Sorry for the notifications. Now, I had promised this because I wanted to unpack that, and typically people appreciate it. I talk about it a lot in, I think, my sessions on accountability and these things and decision-making. So let's look at that real quick. So whenever a topic comes up, so this is good both for circles and for the information flow between individuals and the circles. If you, let's say, take on the issue of putting my own child into the will, if you do that topic, it's a nice idea to kind of split it up or expect and plan for it that we will touch on this topic 3 times in 3 different meetings, if we have the time for that. But it's not that we're just going to talk about it and talk about it again and talk about it again. We will have different questions on the table, a different way of approaching it each time that build on each other. So those three topics are, the first one is understand the topic. What is the information that we all need to know? What are the laws on it? What is our current policy? What is some of the history of the topic? What else is there to think about? So what's going on? Why is this going on? What's the deeper issue here? Blah, 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 all of that. And then the next meeting, you can explore solutions. Like, what should the policy be? How should the policy be changed? Picture forming proposal shaping is a good idea to here if you know what that is. But either way, the idea is to come up with a proposal. And then in the third meeting, we're just trying to make a decision. The cool thing about that is, if you do it this way, is in this phase, so between meeting 1 and meeting 2, you have that shared understanding of the problem you're trying to solve that you can build on. And bonus points, if you have some shared understanding on what the issue is, you can now ask your community and say, so the way we understand what's going on for people around this topic is this and this and this and that. Is that true? Did we get it? Are we on the same page on what the issue is? So now any decision will not come as a surprise to the outside because they've already been warned, that something is going on and they've already been heard the first time. Then, after we've come up with solutions, we now have a draft proposal for next time. And between meeting 2 and 3, people can think about how they feel about the proposal, can write it up in final wording and like really polish it and whatever. And you can send an email and say, these are the proposal ideas that we've had, or this is the draft proposal. This is what we're planning to decide on next time. Anything we need to know? And then you make a decision. And then, of course, what I didn't draw here is after the decision is made, feedback continues, right? Because somebody might hear about it half a year later and still have feedback. And then we want to fold that into our review process of the policy, which I hope we have. So now if we still don't get a response, let's say best prevention happened, somebody's still upset, they've done all they can do. Of course, just reaching out once and saying like, this circle never got back to me is probably not going to be enough. Probably want to try again, or, reach out again. I once was very upset with Common House Circle and I had sent them 2 emails and they never got back to me. And I was like, how can they just ignore me this way? I had a whole story ready of how the Common House Circle sucks and they don't like me. I swear I had it already in my head. It was all clear. The situation was obvious. And then in a meeting, I was starting to rant about how Common House Circle keeps ignoring me and how they don't have their shit together at all, blah, 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 blah. And then I had this little voice of doubt in me. I was like, this seems just so hard to believe. So I checked again, and fair enough, I had emailed the wrong email address. Embarrassing. So trying again, I tried again. They got back to me within 48 hours. I stood corrected. Talk to somebody else and so on. And then maybe you want to escalate it. And that's where either you have a process for that in your governance agreement, or you do whatever you want to do, like talking to the parent circle, having more conversations, maybe, but I would say not. Maybe send an email publicly and say, I've tried to get Common House Circle's attention on this. I'm concerned about this and that. They're not getting back to me. But that's already pretty, that's already going to stir up some trouble. So, and then you use your appeal process or whatever you have in place. But how about you don't? How about you stay on repeat until you get somewhere? And I made a little list of not so effective strategies to be heard, because I see them all around me all the time. So I had to make the please don't do this list just for my own catharsis, actually. Blasting by email. This circle always makes shitty decisions and they never consider the community. That might feel good in the moment. And is it going to solve the problem? Probably not. So if you want the problem solved, don't do it. It's ineffective. It's counterproductive. So not only is it not nice, it's also not giving you what you want. So don't do it. Oh, we have this, I mean, I'm sure you have that too. I hope everybody does. The folder where your drafts go to the community that you never send, right? I have that. Good emails in there. Glad I didn't send them. What do we have here? Hold on, sorry, Zoom. Yeah, there you go. Complaining to people who can't do anything about it, or gossiping without addressing the circle directly. Have you heard Common Circle, but they decided again? Really? Don't know what they're doing, right? Is that going to change anything? No. Do the people here who can change anything about it? No. So is it effective? Absolutely not. It might feel good in the moment, but hopefully doesn't feel good again the next day. Complaining without curiosity of the reasons. Like if a circle keeps getting back to you and saying, we heard you, we get it, and we still want our policy in place, maybe you didn't listen well enough. Maybe you lack perspective that they have. That is something that should cross our mind at some point. Maybe you have a point, but their thing overrides it for them. I just wish I could put that on posters all over my community sometimes. Ooh, not so useful. Going to the parent circle without checking with the actual circle. That's like going to the parents or to the teacher. The circle isn't listening to me. Most likely that circle, if the parent circle is a good parent circle, they're going to say, okay, have you talked to them yet? No? Well, do that first. Ooh, and my very, very favorite, I'm going to join the circle so I can whip them into shape because they obviously don't know what they're doing. That's going to end well, doesn't it? I mean, that's going to be great. Oh my. I hope that doesn't need explanation of how that is a really, really bad idea. Okay, unless of course you say, wow, it seems like they're a little, little low on capacity and bandwidth, because even if after I tried to contact them, they still didn't have bandwidth. Maybe I should join them and help them. But that's a whole different thing than whipping them into shape, right? And then the absolute worst and destructive is this is a bad decision. Now that I think about it, I think the circle shouldn't even have legitimacy to make a decision like this. I think we should pull the plug and just take away their power. That's, first of all, ineffective. Second of all, not going to solve the problem. It's just going to create a big mess. And all of these I've seen. Like, I'm not making this up. Not at all. This happens. So there we go again to that image of the holding hands, right? And I use this image quite a bit in many classes. So it's this whole dynamic of the circle and the outsider. It's not a one-way thing. It's not that the circle is responsible to hear whatever people throw at them. And it's also not true that it's only the outsider's responsibility to make themselves heard. Obviously, there has to be some overlap between the reaching out and the reaching in. And if there's overlap, then people hear each other, everybody's happy, good policies are made. If they miss each other, then it's not going to work so well. That's a simple truth. And that's really, to me, all there is to say. Just try to reach each other. That means maybe if the circle is low capacity, I might have to work harder to be heard by them. Or maybe if I have low capacity because I'm so upset because of whatever, maybe the circle has to work a little harder to make sure they hear me. Our goal is to hear each other and to reach each other. And then we can live peacefully as a community. That's what we want ultimately. So that's how we can do it. And there I am at the end. You might be aware of this, but I thought I'd mention it. We have 2 books out for grown-ups, one for kids that's not on here. But we also, on the content page, we have a free ebook that you can download. If you haven't yet, please do, because it's useful. And I think overall, all of these things can get better with more skills and more knowledge. I'm big in the camp of more like knowledge as power. The more people know, the more skills they have, the better they can live with each other. And I'm complete. Oh, and now I'm seeing all the questions here. That's fun. Yeah, John, do you want to spoon feed me things?
Would you like them spoon-fed, or do you want to?
Absolutely. I would
all right.
absolutely love that, honestly.
We don't have too many questions in the chat quite yet, but if you want to post questions in the chat, folks, you're welcome to. You could also like indicate your hand raise feature in Zoom. We could do live questions. Someone just asked a question. Do you have any experience with objections that are simply rejected?
What does it mean?
That's a good question.
What is it? No, objection. I mean, from the outside or from the inside? Let's cover
That's
that
from Thomas Mead. Thomas, you want to clarify your question a little bit?
From the inside, have you either had experience with a member of a circle making an objection and all the other members of the circle say, we don't need to modify that. It's simply is rejectable. So what are the circumstances under which that might happen?
Well, to me, that goes into the direction of who decides whether an objection is an objection. Is that true? Would you say that's how am I understanding your question correctly, Thomas?
That's a good path to go down.
And that is one of the interesting points in sociocracy, because sociocracy, let's see, how much detail do I give you? Because there are other systems that kind of vet and like test objections and say, is this even an objection? Like, do I need to consider what you said, or can I say it's your problem, I'll ignore it? And sociocracy chooses to be a little bit more on the end of taking things, giving you the benefit of the doubt if you have an objection, and that I can just say, no, that's not even an objection. But what I do in practice very often would be to do a round and say, instead of me as the facilitator deciding it, do a round. And often a prompt that I would give is, okay, so you heard Thomas's objection. What comes up for you around that? And then people might have solutions, or they go like, well, Thomas, I'm not even sure. That's like I don't even quite understand. I don't really get what you're worried about. And I've seen quite a bit, actually. For example, I remember once it was quite funny, actually. So somebody was worried about something, and I in my head thought, that's not even an objection. That's just this person pushing the agenda. But we did this round, and people listened well and kind of validated that person's experience of like, yeah, you're right, that's a little scary. I don't think it's, think it's unlikely that it's happening, but yeah, we hear that. And then after the round, we heard the objector again. And the objector then said, yeah, actually, thank you so much for listening. You're actually right. It's actually unlikely. I'm going to withdraw my objection. But that was the quality of listening that did it. But there is a second act here. Then somebody else said, actually, after hearing her objection, I know she withdrew it, but I actually object now for her reason. And then we did actually end up integrating it. So it was kind of a plot twist twice. So all of this, there's a lot more to say about this, because I think about this particular phenomenon, one could write a whole book. But the bottom line is, I would not even ask the question in this way, because I find it deeply invalidating for people. So I would more, and then they're gonna up their ante, right, and be defensive and like be even more insistent on how the objection is an objection. So the better we can listen in that moment, the more likely the problem will just go away on its own. I really think it's in skills and not in kind of whatever process. Let's see.
Couple more questions in the chat.
Yes, and then there's about manipulative behavior. Is that the next one?
There's one before that, but you could take that one first if you want.
Yes, because it fits right now.
Yeah.
Hold on. Have you seen manipulative behavior such as present of a senior founder visitor who wants to undermine the circle? Yeah. And what? And I think that's why it's a good idea to have this 15-minute rule, for example. I'm actually quite fond of that rule in our particular community. It's not a sociocracy thing, it's just a rule we made for ourselves. Because after that 15 minutes, you can also send the person away and say, thank you, we heard your feedback. Thank you. Now please leave, because we have circle things to do. And then you might even be able to talk without their presence about the thing that they talked about. And then you take the edge off that. Ultimately, if you have a senior founder, whoever person who thinks that they have more power than a circle, you have a bigger problem than the objection. And then that needs deeper looking at it, which, by the way, is one little add-on to the objections from outside. If objections that are not real objections, or whatever you want to call it. My experience is that those that are just kind of in the moment, they kind of dissolve, with good listening. Those that have something deeper going on are not about this objection, they're about something completely different. So, if somebody, for example, is deeply convinced that nobody takes them seriously, they might object for something, but they're going to insist on whatever it is, really because they want to test whether you're going to, like, how well you're going to listen. So it's about something else, and then that needs addressing, because it's not about the proposal on the table. So that means you can't solve it on the proposal on the table, because it's really lives somewhere else. All right, hold on here. By the way, I will put something in the chat in just a moment, an article that I wrote on just like, what did I call it? What if people don't cooperate, is the article called. Does the general circle usually seek feedback before making decisions like the other circles? Yes, and the general circle should hardly make any decisions. This general circle is, in that case, special in that it shouldn't make too many decisions. And if your general circle makes decisions, it has to work like any other circle as well. No difference. Here's the article on what we do with difficult people, or a little bit just thinking about that. And that's it for questions. The other one is a comment. Thank you, Anne.
All right, we've got 10 or 12 minutes before the next session. If anyone else has questions, now would be a great time, but I will say thanks very much, Ted, for offering the wisdom of kind of your experience with the community. I really enjoy the specific examples and the way they relate to what we're talking about here. If anyone has questions, seems like people are navigating the Zoom event structure fairly well, but you'll just close out of this session and then open the next one in your itinerary or in the session list. Still do have a couple more minutes, so if anyone wanted to ask a closing question, you certainly could.
And I put hold on, I'm going to put the link to the slideshow in the chat again. Copy link.
And the very links to the various slides that we're willing to publish are going to be sent out kind of in a follow-up email afterwards too. Anita, your question is kind of interesting. Do you see that one, Ted?
With cognitive, sometimes I need more time to think to understand the issue. Yes, and I think it's great to have a conversation about that. For example, two answers. One is that cadence, I think, helps because it has a thinking time in between, right? If you split things up cleanly into 3 meetings, everybody has a lot of time to think along. And you know exactly what to think about, like sitting with how you understand the thing, sitting with your solution. Those are 2 good thinking moments. The other piece is, for example, we have somebody in my circle in community life that needs to like on big decisions, she always has to sleep for a night. I'm not like that at all. And it's fine that she is. So we have a kind of a rule just within the circle that that the decision, like we make a decision, she says, I consent as far as I know right now, but nothing gets sent out or done until 24 hours later. That way she can say yes, and she doesn't feel like she's committing herself right now, but typically she doesn't have an objection later. So I also don't have to postpone the topic, right? Because I can assume that it's going to be done. And I know in a different organization that's not a community, we have a rule right now that I really like. That is that you can ask for like a grace period at the moment of decision making, which does require you monitoring your own sense of confidence though. And I wouldn't overdo it, but asking for 12 hours of extra time and say, hey, if you don't hear from me, does seem like a good idea. But don't object in 12 hours when you didn't ask for the grace period. That would be disheartening. So, like using all those things within reasons, but I think those are great hacks that make it a little easier. Check.
Very good. Ted, do you want to offer farewell?
Bye-bye. And I love our little webinar tradition that we can also carry over to conferences of unmuting and saying bye-bye, because why not? Unmute so I can hear you.
Bye, Ted.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you
so much, Ted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
I learned a lot.
Ted.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hear you. Okay.